much for joining us today. Welcome back to the Kite Academy. I am so excited to be here today filming the second module of our Foundations course, Sell to a Business and Not Your Buyer. I'm super excited because we're here with Joseph Fung, CEO and co-founder of Kite. That actually tees up the first question perfectly. Why sell to a business and not a buyer?
Oh, fantastic question. I think the single biggest reason is how everything can be systematized. The reality is people, individuals, even businesses buy from people they like. Buying is not always, that's not fair. Buying is rarely a rational decision. And so we often buy from the people that we like. And what's interesting is that while people can be a bit of a mystery sometimes, businesses typically aren't. And so learning how to be someone or a product or a company that a business likes is a much more methodical process and easier to solve. And that's always fun.
Awesome. I love that. The idea of mysterious individuals, less mysterious businesses. If you could elaborate a little bit on that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So on the individual side, we spend a lot of time teaching product managers, sales reps, founders to think about personas. Think about the individual and get right into the weeds. And the reality is for an individual, whether they like you or not could be related to, do you both like pets? Are you both into F1? All these things you use to build rapport, and that's really tough. And if that's why someone buys from you, wow, that does make every conversation a mystery. But if you're a business, the reason people like you, the reason businesses like you is if you understand their strategies, if you understand their needs, if you can delight them by helping them uncover the unique ways to get value out of your product and to stay aligned. And those things are something that you can build as a skill, build as a tool or a system, and translate and share with other sales reps so you can systematize it.
Awesome. So just to dig a little bit deeper there, you mentioned that by systematizing these methods, you can make businesses at scale like you. I know that's an important part of it because it is an emotional buying process, or buying is an emotional process, but what else is it you're doing when you scale those types of methodologies?
So as an example, we spoke about this in the last conversation about the idea of that buyer's journey and having multiple stakeholders. Well, a good example is systematizing that. Very often an individual doesn't even know what they need to do to buy something on behalf of their business. Most contact points, most of the people you're interacting with when you're selling, this might only be their first, second, or third time purchasing a business product. So for themselves, they don't always know what needs to happen, or their business situation has changed, so they don't know what has to happen. If you come forward and you say, hey, this is great, but does IT need to be involved? They often are. Do you need finance approval? They often get involved. By helping that buyer understand the rest of the buying journey they need to go through, you can actually help them do better work as they purchase. And that holds true for that IT director and that finance director. If you're ahead of that game and you help them understand the other stakeholders involved and be respectful of that, you can really nail it. A good example, one really good example, when you're selling software, business software in particular, very often there is a security and privacy review. A seller who's not ready for that gets excited about the deal. Their point of contact said, we're ready to buy, you're our vendor of choice, send me over the contract. The sales rep tells their manager, that's great, this is in the bag, this is gonna land this month. And if they're not ready for that, that buyer takes the order, hands it off to finance, and finance goes, did you finish a security review? That buyer's surprised, sends it over to IT, who gets frustrated that they weren't kept in the cycle. And now that buyer feels foolish. They're telling the sales rep it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks longer to get through this process. And there's a chance that someone might cancel it because they don't know how good that deal is. If you're a sales rep and you know that that typically happens, you can prep your buyer saying, hey, is there going to be an IT review? The buyer says, oh, maybe, let me check into it. And if you can preempt them saying, hey, here's all of our security documentation, so you look good and you're ready, and that buyer now goes to IT and says, we're going to buy this next month. Here's the security information. Let's do a review. They look good. That deal's going to happen, and the rep looks like an expert. And yes, the buyer the IT group, the security group, all like you more, and you're more likely to get that deal.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And so what does it look like to kick off a business buying process? How do I know as a seller that a business is ready to buy?
There's tons of different signals. The big thing to realize is when you're first interacting with a company, they're never ready to buy in the instant. Even when they say, I've got my credit card, I'm ready to buy, even if they give you that credit card, they haven't finished making the evaluation. To take that example, a lot of sales reps take that very fast order and think they've got this great win. You know, high five, lottery ticket, just closed a quick $5,000 deal on the phone. What they don't realize is if the buyer just made a quick snap decision, the rest of the organization hasn't thought it out, which means the organization is still evaluating, even if the purchaser completed the transaction. So the first rule is anytime you're interacting with a business, they aren't actually ready to buy. Your job is to systematize the buying signals for yourself and then get them through that. Every product, every company will be different in subtle ways, but they're going to share some key elements, and we call these qualification criteria. The basics are things like, do they have budget? Do they have the necessary approval? Have you identified a key need? You'll hear sales coaches, leaders talk about BANT and talk about umpteen different frameworks. Your sales leader's job is to help identify the qualification criteria that a sales rep knows, hey, they're ready to buy, and then your job as a sales rep is to help your buyer check all those boxes. Has IT signed off? Has finance signed off? Have we got an internal champion? And once they've checked those all off, you know they're actually ready to buy. Like I said, you can systematize it, and that's what's so beautiful about selling to businesses. It sure as heck doesn't work when you're selling to that individual who's really judging whether or not you like dogs as much as they do.
Yeah. Touche. Great point. I want to come back to that. But just, I mean, everything that you said, it just reminds me, how do we then take that and map it to a buyer's journey? Because a buyer's journey isn't linear. It doesn't necessarily follow a bunch of check boxes or in a row per se. So how do you reconcile the two?
Totally. So the one big thing to differentiate between is those criteria, that idea of a checklist that you said, is very different than the process and the cycle. So a good way to think about the checklist is almost like a report card. Only once someone has gone through and met all those criteria can I consider them the next stage in the way I want to sell. The reality, though, is they're not going to check those boxes all in the same order. They might interact with you, your first call, they're ready to give you their credit card and they've already got finance signed off, they've already got IT signed off, and you think, oh my goodness, you know, they've already checked all these boxes, but you've got something from much earlier, maybe around your functionality or around the direction of your product that you haven't answered yet. Your job as a sales rep is to not just blindly go along, but also make sure you've checked all those boxes. So yes, you need to be adaptable to that buyer's journey, but you also need to make sure that you're meeting all of your qualification criteria and moving forward accordingly.
I love that, thinking about it as though it's a report card with multiple check boxes and phases. It really creates more of a matrix than anything else, which is very compelling. So going back to this idea of individuals versus businesses buying, tell me about, what does it look like to sell to an individual? What happens if I sell to an individual? Will that really hurt me as a seller?
I wouldn't say it's going to hurt you on its own, but it can lull you into a false sense of confidence. To give you a really good example, I can think back to a scenario when I was a buyer. So I was leading a business unit of about 200 people, and I was looking to pick up a piece of recruiting software. I won't name the vendor because I think the situation was a little embarrassing for them. I knew exactly which product I needed because I'd been a customer before. And I went to their website, and right at the top, they had a line for order now, here's the toll-free number. So I called them up. I had to go through a complex IVR before I could get to a rep. I got to the rep on the phone, and I had my credit card out. I knew what the product pricing was because I'd been a customer before, and I was looking to process. And I wanted one seat. I wanted a single seat so that we could use the software and also help build a case internally. Now what happened in that situation was that the rep wasn't ready to meet me where I was at on the buyer's journey. So instead of understanding the fact that I was a customer before, that I knew the information, I'd used the product and I built a case, they insisted on trying to book a demo for me, and the soonest slot they had was a week and a half out.
Oh dear.
Now with 200 people, I had a brief moment of time to complete that transaction. And if they had met me where I was, they would have closed a $2,000 deal in that moment. Now, the first mistake was that they didn't meet me where I was at in my journey, and so they lost that sale. But to come back to your question about selling to the individual versus the business, a rep who went far enough to meet me where I was at would have taken my credit card and processed the deal and high-fived their colleague,
Yeah.
and still would not have actually completed the sale because I was buying to build a business case. What they should have done was close the deal, understood that need, and then over the next month worked with me to build a business case for a much larger sale that the organization would have signed off on. And that's the real peril. Even if you meet the buyer where they are and you close that transaction with the individual, unless you realize that there is an organization behind, you might lose the bigger opportunity and, moreover, undermine your own credibility because you're missing that opportunity to build a relationship and actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, you're leaving it on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, all of that is super fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. Thank you for joining us for the Kite Academy. We hope that you got as much value out of that as I did, and we look forward to seeing you next time.